Dusty was a name whispered with respect in the small town of Redemption Gulch. He wasn't the fastest draw, nor the loudest voice in the saloon, but he possessed a quiet strength and an unwavering honesty that earned him the trust of everyone he met. His weathered face, etched with the lines of hard work and sun, held a gentle smile that could disarm even the most hardened outlaw. Dusty's life was simple, yet fulfilling. He and his best friend, Cole, owned the Double Bar Ranch, a sprawling piece of land that provided a comfortable living for both of them. They'd grown up together, sharing dreams of raising cattle and building a legacy. From mending fences under the scorching sun to sharing stories around crackling campfires, their bond seemed unbreakable. Cole, in contrast to Dusty's calm demeanor, was ambitious and driven by a thirst for more. He was quick-witted and charming, able to talk his way out of almost any situation. While the townsfolk appreciated Cole's charisma, they sensed a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a hunger that never seemed satisfied. The Double Bar Ranch was more than just land. It was the culmination of their shared efforts, a testament to their friendship. Dusty handled the day-to-day operations, possessing an innate understanding of cattle and the land. Cole managed the business side, wheeling and dealing to secure the best prices for their livestock. Together, they formed a formidable team, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. Evenings often found them sitting on the porch of their shared ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. They discussed their plans for the future, dreaming of expanding the ranch and starting families. Dusty often spoke of finding a woman to share his life with, someone who appreciated the simple pleasures of ranch life. Cole, however, seemed more focused on accumulating wealth and power, hinting at grander ambitions beyond Redemption Gulch. Little did Dusty know, Cole's ambition was about to shatter their bond and change both their lives forever. The seeds of Cole's envy had been sown long ago, watered by whispers of admiration directed at Dusty. Cole watched as Dusty effortlessly connected with people, his genuine nature drawing them in like moths to a flame. Even the local dogs seemed to prefer Dusty's gentle pats to Cole's forced affection. The imbalance gnawed at him, a constant reminder that he wasn't the hero of this story, merely a supporting character. The Double Bar Ranch, while successful, wasn't enough for Cole. He craved more land, more cattle, more influence. He saw Dusty's contentment as a weakness, a lack of ambition that held him back. He began to resent Dusty's easygoing nature, viewing it as laziness rather than genuine satisfaction. One day, a wealthy businessman from the east arrived in Redemption Gulch, looking to invest in a large cattle operation. Cole saw this as his opportunity. He envisioned expanding the Double Bar into a sprawling empire, a monument to his own success. However, he knew Dusty would never agree to the terms the businessman proposed, a ruthless takeover of smaller ranches and a disregard for the well-being of the community. Cole started subtly planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the townspeople, small lies designed to tarnish Dusty's reputation. He exaggerated minor mistakes, twisted innocent actions, and painted Dusty as irresponsible and reckless. He befriended some of the local ranchers, offering them loans and favors while subtly suggesting that Dusty was secretly undermining their businesses. He started small, a whispered comment here, a knowing glance there. But with each successful manipulation, Cole grew bolder, his web of deceit slowly tightening around Dusty. He knew he had to act quickly before the businessman lost interest, and before Dusty discovered his treachery. The plan was risky, but the potential reward, complete control of the Double Bar and the respect he craved, was too tempting to resist. He was ready to betray his best friend. Cole's manipulation escalated. He needed a dramatic event, something that would irrevocably turn the town against Dusty. He chose his moment carefully. A string of robberies had plagued the local bank, leaving the town on edge. Cole saw his opportunity to frame Dusty for the crimes. He subtly diverted some of the Double Bar's cattle, driving them to a hidden location and then reporting them as stolen. He then discovered Dusty's boot prints near the empty cattle pens, conveniently overlooked by everyone else. He made sure to confide in the sheriff, expressing his deep concern that Dusty might be involved in something shady. The final piece of his plan involved planting stolen money from the bank in Dusty's saddlebags. He waited for Dusty to ride into town, then alerted the sheriff, claiming he'd seen Dusty acting suspiciously near the bank earlier that day. The sheriff, already primed by Cole's earlier insinuations, reluctantly agreed to search Dusty. The discovery of the money was a shock, even to Cole. He had expected Dusty to deny everything, but Dusty's face registered pure disbelief and confusion. He vehemently protested his innocence, but the evidence was damning. The stolen cattle, the boot prints, the money, it all pointed to Dusty. The town, already swayed by Cole's subtle campaign of lies, quickly turned on Dusty. Faces that once beamed with warmth now glared with suspicion. Whispers replaced friendly greetings, and Dusty found himself isolated and alone. He tried to explain, to reason, but no one would listen. Cole stood by, feigning sympathy while secretly relishing Dusty's downfall. The trap had been sprung, and Dusty was caught in its jaws. The man who was once the pride of Redemption Gulch was now an outcast, facing the wrath of a community he had always served faithfully. His world was crumbling around him, piece by agonizing piece. The jail cell was cold and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the warmth of the Double Bar Ranch. Dusty sat on the edge of the cot, his head in his hands, trying to make sense of what had happened. He replayed the events of the day over and over in his mind, searching for a clue, a reason, anything that could explain the betrayal. It was then, staring at the rough-hewn walls of his prison, that the truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Cole. It had to be Cole. The pieces fell into place. The subtle digs, the concerned whispers, the convenient discovery of the evidence. Cole had orchestrated everything. The realization was like a knife twisting in his gut. Not only had he lost his freedom and his reputation, but he had been betrayed by the one person he trusted most in the world. Despair threatened to engulf him, but a flicker of anger ignited within his heart. He wouldn't let Cole win. He wouldn't rot in jail while Cole enjoyed the fruits of his treachery. He had to find a way to clear his name and reclaim what was rightfully his. An opportunity presented itself in the form of a cattle drive. A large herd needed to be moved across dangerous territory, and the sheriff, short on manpower, reluctantly agreed to let Dusty join the crew, under heavy guard, of course. Dusty saw this as his chance. He spent the next few days observing the terrain, studying the guards, and formulating his plan. He knew it was risky, but it was his only hope. During a particularly treacherous river crossing, with the cattle jostling and the water raging, Dusty saw his opening. He intentionally allowed himself to be swept away by the current, disappearing beneath the churning water. The guards, believing him to be dead, searched briefly before reporting his demise to the sheriff. Dusty, however, had anticipated this. He'd planned his escape meticulously, using his knowledge of the land to his advantage. He was gone, vanished without a trace. As far as Redemption Gulch was concerned, Dusty was dead. But in reality, he was just beginning. The news of Dusty's death spread like wildfire through Redemption Gulch. At first, disbelief reigned. Surely, Dusty, the strong and capable cowboy, couldn't have simply drowned. But as the days turned into weeks with no sign of his body, the grim reality sunk in. He was gone. Cole, ever the master manipulator, put on a convincing display of grief. He spoke of Dusty's kindness and generosity, conveniently omitting his own role in Dusty's downfall. He organized a memorial service, shedding crocodile tears as he eulogized his dear friend. The town, swayed by his performance, offered their condolences and support. With Dusty out of the picture, Cole wasted no time consolidating his power. He presented the town with a forged will, conveniently leaving him the sole owner of the Double Bar Ranch. The sheriff, still under Cole's influence, validated the document without question. Cole quickly took control of the ranch, implementing the ruthless business practices he had always envisioned. He squeezed the smaller ranchers, forcing them to sell their land at rock-bottom prices. He mistreated his workers, demanding long hours and paying meager wages. The Double Bar Ranch prospered, but at the expense of the community. He also struck the deal with a wealthy businessman, transforming the Double Bar into a sprawling empire. He built a lavish mansion for himself, flaunting his wealth and power. He became a prominent figure in the region, but his reputation was tarnished. The townspeople, while initially sympathetic, began to see Cole's true colors. They whispered about his greed and his lack of compassion. The Double Bar Ranch, once a symbol of friendship and cooperation, became a symbol of Cole's ruthless ambition. He had gained everything he desired, but he had lost something far more valuable: the respect of the community. A sense of unease began to creep into Cole's life. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that Dusty's ghost was somehow haunting him. He tried to dismiss it as guilt, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. 5 years had passed since Dusty's death. The name was now a faded memory, a whispered story of a good man gone too soon. The Double Bar Ranch, under Cole's iron fist, had transformed into a symbol of greed and oppression. The once vibrant town of Redemption Gulch was now shrouded in a palpable sense of unease and resentment. One sweltering afternoon, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. He was tall and lean, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were worn but well-maintained, and a pair of gleaming revolvers hung low on his hips. He rode a sleek black stallion, its muscles rippling beneath its dark coat. This was Rio. He rode into town with an air of quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the dusty streets and the weathered faces of the townsfolk. He stopped at the saloon, dismounting with a fluid grace that hinted at years of experience in the saddle. He tied his horse to the hitching post and strode through the swinging doors, the silence in the room broken only by the clinking of spurs. Rio ordered a whiskey, his voice a low, gravelly drawl that commanded attention. He listened intently to the conversations around him, absorbing the atmosphere of the town. He heard whispers of Cole's ruthlessness, tales of broken promises and shattered dreams. He learned of the hardships the townspeople had endured under Cole's reign. As he finished his drink, a group of Cole's men entered the saloon, their eyes fixed on Rio. They were known for their arrogance and their willingness to enforce Cole's will with violence. The leader, a burly man with a scar across his face, approached Rio, his eyes narrowed. "You new in town, stranger," he growled. "You got a name?" Rio slowly turned, his hand hovering near his gun. "They call me Rio," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "And I'm just passing through." But the look in his eyes suggested otherwise. Rio had arrived in Redemption Gulch, and things were about to change. The game had begun. The encounter in the saloon was just the beginning. Rio, or rather, Dusty in disguise, knew he had to tread carefully. He couldn't reveal his true identity too soon, or Cole would have him killed before he could expose the truth. He needed to earn the trust of the townspeople, to show them that he was different from Cole and his henchmen. He started small, helping those in need. He rescued a farmer whose cattle had been stolen by Cole's men, returning the animals and earning the farmer's gratitude. He defended a young woman from harassment by a group of drunken cowboys, displaying his quick reflexes and deadly accuracy with a gun, but without resorting to unnecessary violence. He quietly paid the medical bills for a sick child, refusing to take credit for his generosity. With each act of kindness and courage, Rio's reputation grew. The townspeople began to see him as a protector, a symbol of hope in their oppressed lives. They whispered his name with respect, comparing him to the legendary heroes of the West. Rio made a point of being fair and honest in all his dealings. He bought supplies from the local merchants at fair prices, refusing to take advantage of their desperation. He offered work to those who had been blacklisted by Cole, providing them with a chance to earn an honest living. He also made sure to keep a low profile, avoiding unnecessary confrontations and refusing to be drawn into Cole's games. He knew that Cole was watching him, suspicious of his motives. He had to be patient, to bide his time until the moment was right to reveal his true identity and expose Cole's treachery. One evening, as Rio sat alone on the porch of his rented room, an old woman approached him. She was frail and wrinkled, but her eyes sparkled with intelligence. "You remind me of someone," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone who used to live here. A good man, who was betrayed by a friend." Rio looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he been discovered? "What was his name?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The old woman smiled. "Dusty," she said. His name was Dusty. Rio knew then that he was on the right track. The town was ready for his return. Now that he had the town's attention and a degree of their trust, Rio began to subtly undermine Cole's operations. He didn't resort to violence or open confrontation. Instead, he used his intelligence and skills to expose Cole's dishonesty and help those he had wronged. He discovered that Cole was cheating the local ranchers by manipulating the scales at the weigh station. Rio quietly alerted the ranchers, providing them with evidence of Cole's deceit. The ranchers, emboldened by Rio's support, confronted Cole, demanding fair treatment. Cole, caught off guard, was forced to back down, losing a significant amount of money and prestige. He learned that Cole was secretly diverting water from the town's irrigation system to his own fields, leaving the other farmers struggling to survive. Rio, using his knowledge of the land, located the diversion and restored the water flow to its rightful course. The grateful farmers hailed him as a savior, their crops thriving once again. He uncovered evidence that Cole had bribed the sheriff to overlook his illegal activities. Rio anonymously sent the evidence to a circuit judge, who launched an investigation into the sheriff's conduct. The sheriff, fearing exposure, resigned in disgrace, paving the way for a new, honest lawman to take his place. These acts of subtle sabotage chipped away at Cole's power and influence. The townspeople, seeing that Rio was willing to stand up to Cole, grew bolder in their resistance. They started to question Cole's authority, to challenge his decisions, to demand justice. Cole, sensing that his grip on Redemption Gulch was slipping, became increasingly paranoid and desperate. He increased his security, tightened his control over the town, and lashed out at anyone who dared to defy him. But his efforts were futile. Rio had planted the seeds of rebellion, and they were beginning to sprout. The town was ready to fight back, and Rio would be there to lead the charge. The time for subtle sabotage was coming to an end. The time for open confrontation was drawing near. Cole's paranoia intensified. He couldn't shake the feeling that Rio was more than just a drifter passing through. There was something familiar about him, a certain way he moved, a glint in his eyes that stirred unsettling memories. He started to see Dusty in Rio, fleeting glimpses of his former friend that sent shivers down his spine. He began to scrutinize Rio's every move, searching for concrete proof of his true identity. He ordered his men to follow Rio, to gather information, to find anything that could confirm his suspicions. He even hired a Pinkerton detective to investigate Rio's past, but the detective came up empty-handed. Rio seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, with no history, no family, no ties to anyone. The lack of information only fueled Cole's anxiety. He started to have nightmares, vivid dreams of Dusty rising from the river, his eyes burning with vengeance. He became increasingly erratic, lashing out at his men and making irrational decisions. He noticed subtle similarities between Rio and Dusty. The way Rio handled horses, his knowledge of the local terrain, even the way he tied his bandana, they were all eerily reminiscent of Dusty. He remembered a scar on Dusty's left hand, a mark he had gotten as a boy while working on the ranch. He desperately tried to get a glimpse of Rio's hand, but Rio always kept it hidden. One night, Cole confronted Rio in the saloon. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "What do you want?" Rio simply smiled, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "I'm just a friend of the town," he replied, his voice calm and controlled. "Someone who wants to see justice done." Cole lunged at Rio, grabbing his arm and trying to force him to show his hand. Rio easily shrugged him off, his movements swift and precise. "Careful, Cole," he warned, his voice hardening. "You don't want to start something you can't finish." The encounter left Cole shaken and terrified. He was convinced that Rio was Dusty, returned from the grave to seek revenge. He knew he had to act quickly to eliminate Rio before he could expose his crimes and destroy everything he had built. The hunter had become the hunted. Cole's attempts to eliminate Rio became increasingly desperate and reckless. He organized ambushes, hired assassins, and even tried to frame Rio for crimes he didn't commit. But Rio, always one step ahead, managed to evade every trap. His skills as a gunslinger and his knowledge of the land proved to be invaluable assets. Each failed attempt only fueled Cole's rage and paranoia. He became obsessed with destroying Rio, neglecting his business and alienating his remaining allies. His empire, once built on deceit and manipulation, began to crumble under the weight of his obsession. Meanwhile, Rio continued to gather evidence of Cole's crimes. He secretly met with the ranchers and farmers who had been wronged by Cole, documenting their stories and collecting proof of his fraudulent activities. He also located the original will, the one that Cole had forged to steal the Double Bar Ranch. He knew that he needed more than just evidence to convince the townspeople of Cole's guilt. He needed to show them that he was Dusty, that he had returned to reclaim what was rightfully his. But he also knew that revealing his true identity too soon could jeopardize his plan. He decided to drop subtle hints, to let the townspeople gradually piece together the truth. He started to use phrases and expressions that were unique to Dusty, to share stories about his past, to talk about his love for the Double Bar Ranch. He also started to spend time with some of Dusty's old friends, people who had known him well and trusted him implicitly. He shared memories with them, reminding them of the good old days and rekindling their faith in him. One of those friends was a grizzled old rancher named Jebediah, who had been Dusty's mentor and confidant. Jebediah had always been suspicious of Cole, and he had never fully accepted Dusty's death. Rio confided in Jebediah, revealing his true identity and sharing his plan to expose Cole. Jebediah, overjoyed to see his friend alive, pledged his support and vowed to help him in any way he could. The stage was set for the final act. The truth was about to be revealed. Rio knew the time had come to force Cole's hand. He couldn't wait any longer. The town was on the brink of open rebellion, and Cole was becoming increasingly unpredictable. He needed to expose Cole's crimes and reveal his true identity before anyone else got hurt. He decided to stage a public confrontation, a showdown that would force Cole to reveal his true colors. He sent word to Cole, challenging him to a duel at high noon in the center of town. He knew that Cole wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to finally eliminate him. The news of the duel spread like wildfire through Redemption Gulch. The townspeople gathered in the streets, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation. They knew that this was more than just a personal feud. It was a battle for the soul of their town. As the clock struck noon, Rio strode into the center of town, his face grim, his eyes fixed on Cole. Cole was already there, surrounded by his men, his face contorted with rage. "So, you finally decided to show your face," Cole sneered, his hand hovering near his gun. "I knew it was only a matter of time." "It's over, Cole," Rio replied, his voice calm but firm. "Your lies and your deceit are over. The town knows the truth about you." "The truth?" Cole scoffed. "What do they know?" "They know that you're a troublemaker, a liar, a thief. They know that you're nothing but a low-down gunslinger trying to stir up trouble. They know that you framed Dusty for crimes he didn't commit," Rio retorted. "They know that you stole the Double Bar Ranch. They know that you've been cheating them and exploiting them for your own gain." Cole's face turned crimson with anger. "That's a lie," he shouted. "All lies. He was a criminal." Rio paused, then slowly reached up and removed his hat, letting it fall to the ground. He looked directly at Cole, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Is it Cole?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Is it a lie?" A gasp went through the crowd. They recognized those eyes. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The final act was about to begin. "Yes, it is me, Cole," Rio continued, his voice now resonating with the familiar tone of Dusty. "I'm back to reclaim what you stole from me, from this town." He gestured to Jebediah, who stepped forward, holding a worn leather satchel. "This here's the evidence. Jebediah announced, his voice strong and clear. Dusty, has been working hard to get it all together. Jebediah opened the satchel and began to pull out the items, one by one. First, he produced the original will, the one that proved Cole had forged the document that gave him ownership of the Double Bar Ranch. The crowd gasped as they saw the difference between the two wills, the forged signature clearly visible. Next, he presented signed affidavits from the ranchers and farmers who had been cheated by Cole, detailing his fraudulent practices and his ruthless exploitation of the community. Each affidavit was a testament to Cole's greed and his disregard for the well-being of others. Finally, he revealed a letter written by the former sheriff, confessing to his role in framing Dusty for the bank robberies and cattle theft. The letter detailed how Cole had bribed him to plant the evidence and turn the town against Dusty. As each piece of evidence was presented, the crowd grew more and more enraged. They had been deceived, manipulated, and exploited by Cole for far too long. Their anger reached a boiling point, and they turned their eyes on Cole, their faces filled with hatred. Cole stood frozen, his face pale with fear. He knew that he was defeated. The evidence was overwhelming, and the town had turned against him. He had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "It's all lies," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "Fabrications. They're all trying to frame me." But no one believed him. The evidence spoke for itself, and the truth was finally out in the open. The town had been awakened, and they were ready to take back what was rightfully theirs. The reign of Cole was coming to an end. Justice was about to be served. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Cole, cornered and desperate, finally snapped. He drew his gun, aiming it at Dusty. "I should have killed you a long time ago," he screamed, his voice cracking with rage. But before he could fire, the townspeople surged forward, blocking his shot. They had had enough of Cole's tyranny, and they were no longer afraid. They were ready to defend Dusty, their protector, their friend. Cole, realizing that he was outnumbered and outgunned, panicked. He tried to push through the crowd, but they held firm, their faces filled with determination. Dusty stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Cole. "It's over, Cole," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You've lost. Give up." Cole hesitated for a moment, then lunged at Dusty, swinging his gun like a club. Dusty easily dodged the blow and disarmed Cole with a swift, precise movement. Cole, now weaponless, fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Dusty," he pleaded, his voice filled with despair. "Don't do this. I'm your friend. We were partners." Dusty looked at Cole, his face a mask of sadness. He remembered the good old days, the days when they were friends, when they shared dreams and aspirations. But those days were gone, replaced by betrayal and deceit. "You made your choice, Cole," Dusty said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You betrayed me. You betrayed this town. You have to pay for what you've done." He turned to the townspeople, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for standing by me. Together, we've brought justice to Redemption Gulch." The townspeople erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the streets. They had finally reclaimed their town, their freedom, their dignity. The nightmare was over. A new era had begun. The sun set, casting long shadows across Redemption Gulch, a symbol of the peace and prosperity that was to come. The reign of Dusty was about to begin. The new sheriff, an honest and fair man, arrived the next day. He reviewed the evidence against Cole and, with a heavy heart, placed him under arrest. Cole was charged with forgery, fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. As he was led away in handcuffs, Cole looked back at Dusty, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and regret. "You haven't won, Dusty," he spat. "This isn't over." But Dusty simply shook his head. "It is over, Cole," he said. "It's finally over." Whether Cole faced a trial and imprisonment or managed to escape custody and flee Redemption Gulch, the outcome was the same. He lost everything. His wealth, his power, his reputation. All were gone, stripped away by his own greed and ambition. The Double Bar Ranch was returned to Dusty, its rightful owner. The townspeople celebrated his return, throwing a huge party in his honor. They decorated the streets with banners and flags, and they danced and sang late into the night. Dusty, however, remained humble and grounded. He knew that he had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. He vowed to use his experience to help others, to prevent similar betrayals from happening in the future. He forgave those who had doubted him, those who had turned against him when he was framed. He understood that they had been misled by Cole's lies, and he held no grudges. He also made amends to those who had been wronged by Cole, compensating them for their losses and helping them to rebuild their lives. He restored the water flow to the farmers' fields. He lowered the prices at the general store, and he offered jobs to those who had been blacklisted by Cole. Slowly but surely, Redemption Gulch began to heal. The scars of Cole's reign began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The town was once again a place of peace, prosperity, and community. And Dusty, the cowboy who had been betrayed and left for dead, was now its respected and beloved leader. He had taken back everything he had lost, and he had emerged stronger and wiser than ever before. Dusty settled back in a life at the Double Bar Ranch, but he was a changed man. The betrayal had hardened him, but it had also given him a deeper understanding of human nature. He knew that even the closest of friends could be capable of deception, and he vowed to be more vigilant in the future. He dedicated himself to helping others, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. He traveled to neighboring towns, speaking to ranchers and farmers about the dangers of greed and the importance of honesty. He warned them about the signs of betrayal, urging them to trust their instincts and to be wary of those who seemed too good to be true. He also became a mentor to young cowboys, teaching them not only how to ride and rope, but also how to be good men, how to be honest and fair in all their dealings. He instilled in them a sense of community and a commitment to justice. The Double Bar Ranch became a haven for those in need, a place where people could find shelter, food, and a helping hand. Dusty welcomed all who came to his door, regardless of their background or their past. He believed that everyone deserved a second chance, and he was determined to provide them with the opportunity to rebuild their lives. He never forgot Cole, but he didn't dwell on the past. He forgave him, not for Cole's sake, but for his own. He knew that holding on to anger and resentment would only poison his soul. Years passed, and Dusty became a legend in the West. He was known not only as the cowboy who had been betrayed and left for dead, but also as the man who had risen above adversity, who had reclaimed his life and his reputation, and who had dedicated himself to making the world a better place. He never married, but he found fulfillment in his work and in his relationships with the people of Redemption Gulch. He was surrounded by friends and loved ones, and he knew that he had finally found peace. The cowboy who had been lost had finally found his way home, and in doing so, he had transformed not only his own life, but the lives of everyone around him. The end.